Everybody ready to go?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to call the City Council meeting of March the 6th to order. Lisa, would you please call the roll?
Farrell.
Here.
Adams.
Here.
Lewis.
Here.
Gray.
Here.
Boudreaux.
Here.
Kenyon.
Here.
Petty.
Here.
Tennant.
Here.
Mayor Jordan.
Here. Do you join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first thing we have tonight is the fourth quarter financial report 2011 by Paul Becker, Finance Director. Paul?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. 2011 closed out and was a very positive year for the city of Fayetteville. When we look at the general fund, revenues were up, and we had an adjusted surplus of about $1.4 million. When I say adjusted surplus, we have to adjust what the raw surplus is for items that were carried over into the 2012 budget. So we ended up about $1.4 million surplus for the year, which is very, very positive. What was good about that compared to last year, it was almost equally split. $764,000 of that is for revenue increases, and over $600,000 were because of expenditures that weren't made. So that's pretty positive. Last year, if you remember when we discussed the operating results, it was primarily due, we have surplus, but it was primarily due to expenditure reduction. Now, expenditure reduction can't go on and increase forever. When you see the revenue goes up, that means that your spending may be able to go up and you can fund more items. So it was positive for us to see the part of that surplus due to the revenue. When I analyzed the other funds, such as water, sewer, solid waste, etc., we had surpluses. Now those are surpluses over depreciation, so they had positive cash flows. So we can be assured that our capital programs will continue. As far as the HMR fund or the Parks Fund, that was positive also, and revenues in the Parks Fund, the HMR taxes were up approximately 7% for the year, so that was good news for us. The Parking Fund showed a surplus of $393,000, so all in all, it was a very positive year for us. I'm very pleased with the results, and moving into 2012, I'm confident we're in a good position to move forward and cover that budget.
What questions do we have for Paul on this? Okay, thank you, Paul. All right, on the consent agenda tonight, we have number one, approval of the February 21st, 2012 City Council meeting minutes. Number two, Office of National Drug Control Policy, Gulf Coast High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. Resolution approving a budget adjustment in the amount of $98,808, recognizing revenue from the Office of National Drug Control Policy, Gulf Coast High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. Number three, Water and Sewer Relocation AHTD Utility Agreement. Resolution approving a contract with the Arkansas State Highway and Transportation Commission regarding utility construction and relocation of water and sewer utilities related to the Highway 112 Spur Garland Avenue Widening and Improvement Project. Number four, Garver LLC, a resolution approving a contract with Garver LLC in an amount not to exceed $40,000 for professional engineering services related to the renovation of the Wilson Park swimming pool deck and interior. Number five, 4248 South School Avenue hangar improvements.
Mr. Mayor, I think we need to pull item 5. That was a slight change. We'll have a new resolution to submit to City Council.
Sorry. All right, we're going to pull number 5. All right, I'll go on. Number 6, City of Elkins cost share agreement and resolution approving a cost sharing agreement with the City of Elkins in an amount not to exceed $150,000 for replacement improvements of the Elkins outfall sewer line. Number 7, Rosetta Construction LLC, a resolution to approve a construction contract with Rosetta Construction LLC for $692,223 with a contingency of $50,000 to construct Elkins outfall gravity sewer improvements and to approve the attached budget adjustment of $416,818. Number 8, Off-Street Parking Development District Number 1 appointment. Resolution to approve the appointment of James A. Williams, Jr. to the Board of improvement of the downtown off-street parking development district number 1 of the city of Fayetteville. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as read.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as read. Lisa, would you please call the roll?
Farrell,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Boudreaux,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Tennant.
Yes.
Okay. Under unfinished business, number 1, amend chapter 150.
I think, don't we go immediately to the consent
Yes.
agenda? I think Mr. Boudreaux is here, the airport director, explain why we need to change this resolution.
Oh, I apologize. Sorry, Ray.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for allowing me to bring this to you. The day after I briefed you on the project, the state decided that they would not consider contingency on a project of this type, so therefore we have changed the resolution to delete the contingency and therefore change the budget adjustment to reflect the project total cost. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
I would note that the new resolution is on your table with the changes that the airport director has said is in there, and so we would now need a motion to amend the resolution to the resolution that's on the table in front of you, and then after that to approve it.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second to amend the 4248 South School Avenue hangar improvements, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Motion's, Lisa, would you please call the roll?
Farrell,
Yes. Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Boudreaux,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Tennant.
Yes.
Okay, now, that it's amended, is there any
You probably ought to read
questions?
the title,
Yes.
Mayor.
Thank you. All right. A resolution awarding bid number 12-22 and authorizing a contract with Pickett Construction Incorporated in the amount of $235,100 for the construction of alterations and improvements to the hangar at 4248 South School Avenue, amending resolution number 12-12, authorizing application for and accepting an 80/20 grant from the Arkansas Department of Aeronautics to partially fund the project and approving a budget adjustment. Correct?
That's correct.
All right. Any,
I have a question
okay.
about the contingency
Right.
amount. Is that the same? Is the contingency amount the same in the?
There is no contingency.
Okay, so that's the,
We are approving a contract and
it's set.
a application for a grant in the total amount of the project, which includes the construction and the engineering and some administrative fees.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Any public comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council, and I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to pass the resolution. Any final comments from the council? Lisa, would you please call the roll?
Farrell,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Boudreaux,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Tennant.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you all. Thank you, Ray. Under unfinished business, number 1, amend chapter 151, definition of family. An ordinance to amend the definition of family found in chapter 151, definitions of the Unified Development Code to allow the city council to authorize up to 5 unrelated persons in some units of a planned zoning district. Ordinance was left on the first reading at the February 7, 2012 city council meeting. This ordinance was left on the second reading at the February 21st, 2012 city council meeting. I will entertain a motion to go to the third and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to go to the third and final reading. Lisa, would you please call the roll?
Farrell,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Boudreaux,
Yes.
Kenyon,
No.
Petty,
Yes.
Tennant.
Yes.
An ordinance to amend the definition of family found in Chapter 151 definitions of the Unified Development Code to allow the city council to authorize up to 5 unrelated persons in some units of a planned zoning district.
Okay, staff, have anything, or Rhonda, do you, Sarah?
I would actually like to propose an amendment to this before we further discuss it.
Okay,
This amendment has been prepared for your consideration. The new language of the amendment is bolded within Section 1, and there's two changes that you can read, and I'll leave it up to our alderman who suggested this amendment.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you for taking time to address this and draft this. So the background is, in looking at this and hearing from neighbors and citizens, if this is going to pass, I would like to have further assurance of a couple of different topics, specifically parking and traffic. And I understand that the PZD process is very detailed and that there are opportunities for discussing this at the time. The reality is, right now, a lot of our areas, we aren't necessarily able to, the infrastructure is not there very much. It's not very good yet to withstand the infill and capacity that 5 people in a dwelling would require. And so this is saying, the language says, it adds language saying applying that, so the district with proper safeguards, plan zoning district with proper safeguards for surrounding neighborhoods, such as applying parking requirements according to 172.11 and in the code, and then requiring, so, and then jumps down that the city council shall consider whether an applicant's PZD with one or more 5 unrelated person structures would cause unreasonable traffic into an adjoining residential neighborhood before approving any such PZD. So really looking at the traffic issues, specifically if 5 unrelated people are allowed to live and be housed within a PZD. And so those are the 2 topics that I would like you to consider as basically what I would call a friendly amendment to this, saying that specifically in the consideration of a PZD, when 5 people are being proposed, that really we carefully consider parking and traffic as part of that.
Okay, where it says, the city council shall consider whether an applicant's,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to,
that should be PZD, right?
PZD, it should say.
Or am I wrong?
yeah, it is a PZD.
Okay,
And also, it should read, the city council shall consider whether an applicant's PZD with a structure with 5 or more unrelated persons would cause unreasonable traffic into the adjoining residential neighborhood before approving any such PZD.
Oh, so basically, I want to be sure I'm clear on this myself. So if the council determines that the traffic's unreasonable, basically they can turn it down for that reason. Is that the gist of it?
That's correct.
Okay. Bob?
Who determines the rationale for unreasonable traffic? Is this, I understand it comes to the council, but I mean, does the staff,
Staff will make a recommendation, the planning commission will also make a recommendation. The final determination has been done by the city council. It is similar to what we have for preliminary plats and large-scale developments. If they create an unreasonable traffic hazard, then they can be turned down. So it's the same sort of unreasonable traffic situation that you could look at in this and make your determination.
Kids, that's sort of like what we do with, say, rezoning or something like that.
Not normally with rezoning, but you can with development. And
That's-
of course, you have a lot of discretion in here as the city council. You can make determinations, and for any reason that it would have an adverse impact or be
Right.
incompatible with the adjoining property, you can turn it down.
another question on that, Mayor.
Yes.
Let's say that somebody goes, an applicant decides that they would like to be considered for this and come to the council, and that they're aside and apart from established neighborhoods, significant ways away from them. Where would you go to consider problems to the adjoining neighborhoods? Would you go to the nearest intersection if it was a mile away and something like that to look at it?
We're really leaving this up much more to the city council's discretion and judgment, because it's very hard to decide on the front end how far you should go away or where you should measure something. This is something that is totally dependent upon the facts of every situation, where the property's located, where the neighborhoods are, what kind of roads are around there. So I think that this is something that we really can't get, if you try to get over detailed in here, you can't make the right decision because we can't anticipate the future.
I wasn't trying to get over detailed, but my expectation is that if and when some of these come forward, they're gonna be, like
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Question.
Yes.
I'm looking at 172.11 right now. Do I remember this right, that this is the ordinance, Sarah, that you brought forward before to help control parking in front yards?
It's correct, so Shirley, Lucas, and I proposed, and this council passed the resolution, or excuse me, ordinance that would designate the parking area and limit the number of cars to 4 in the driveway, within the driveway, or a designated parking area. Of course, if the cars are under in a garage, then they don't count. And so essentially what that would do is encourage a developer to put the cars under the building and reduce their footprint.
Okay. This code references single-family homes, and I read it as it only applies to single-family districts. So if a PZD were to come forward with a request to build multifamily units where 5 people could live together in each unit, would this code apply?
It can, and that's why I put in there, even though this must be in a multifamily plan zoning district, because it cannot be in a single-family plan zoning district. But you can still say that even though normally section 172.11 applies only in single-family districts, you're absolutely correct, you can through this say it will apply in this very rare circumstances where you might allow up to 5 unrelated persons in a single housing unit. It's only something for you to consider. You do not have to decide that. It might be that all the roads or the driveways will be facing the development itself and none of them facing a single-family neighborhood. You might feel like, well, it's not appropriate there. Or you might want to encourage carports or garages, as Alderman Lewis has said. You know, really, it's up to the city council to determine whether or not how to make any proposed development compatible with the neighborhood.
It all makes sense to me for PZDs that resemble single-family districts. I guess I was just curious how it would apply. I've never seen a multifamily unit where you could even define what the front yard was. So I was just curious. That sounds good.
With these structures, you might, though, because they might look very much like a house.
That's true.
One
Yes,
other question.
sure.
The part that says that we are to consider the traffic impact on other neighborhoods, aren't we already required to do that with every rezoning?
Well, that's what I thought.
There is a little bit of consideration on rezoning you can, but primarily that is taken up in development itself, where you're looking to see whether it's creating a dangerous traffic hazard. You certainly can consider in a rezoning traffic conditions, and therefore you could say, well, we can't rezone this land to a very high density because there's not enough infrastructure, street infrastructure to handle it.
Right.
So yes, you can consider that in a rezoning, and also can consider in the development process.
Okay.
That's what I remember, because we got into this debate sort of over the sale barn, you know. My issue was
That's
egress and the traffic stacking and things like that. So I remember in that particular rezoning that we did look at that. You gave us a list of criteria where if you didn't feel that you needed to rezone, remember the compatibility and all that good stuff. Yeah. Okay, what is, Brenda?
Well, and it's been a while since we've done a plan zoning district, but as I recall, we did review a lot of things we don't normally review in a normal rezoning, don't we?
That's correct, because you're looking at the development as well as the zoning, so there are a lot of criteria that we have in the PZD ordinance to review.
And I thought the streets and all of that were a part of that, but.
That's correct.
So, is this, does staff feel like this is being kind of redundant, or does it actually add to this?
The one thing that it could add that we normally wouldn't with multifamily is that section particularly related to adding the parking requirements of 172.11. That's not something we would normally apply because it's specifically for single-family districts, so that may be a help in terms of the parking issue, because again, that's the primary complaint that our office gets is the parking related to unrelated persons living together.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Okay. Now, we will take some public comment on the amendment. Now, everybody, let's stay on the amendment about the parking and the traffic, all right? Now, everybody gets one turn at the microphone. Talk directly to the chair. Don't engage an alderman. Talk directly to me. Introduce yourself, where you live, and, just trying to think, be courteous, and, okay, who will be first?
So are we just talking about this amendment?
Just the amendment right now, Paul.
Okay. My name is Paula Marinoni, and I'm the listing broker and part owner of the Marinoni Farm, which is a property, not the only property, but a property that would be affected by this whole amendment that's being brought forward. On this specific amendment that has been brought forward by Alderman Lewis, I would ask you not to approve it. This process of having to get permission to even ask is already delaying a certain project 3 months, and the traffic is already a consideration in any zoning like you talked about, and especially in a planned zoning district, which was why it was recommended that this project be brought forward as a PZD, so that because of the fifth person and because it's something that the community is not familiar with, to ensure that the community has adequate input and that the city council has final say on everything, and that you can make sure that it's something you feel comfortable with. So the traffic part of it is redundant, that is already covered. But the 172, that's a 2-page ordinance that is very specific to single-family houses. And it was written for that. And it was written with saying that you can't have more than 4 cars that are not, that are out and not covered. That automatically makes the project that I'm talking about not doable, because in this ordinance, it assumes that those single-family houses all have garages that in current standards would be a 2-car garage. So you could actually have 6 cars. But this project that I'm specifically looking at, there are no garages or carports, and they plan this whole thing with clusters and with planning the synergy of how people move through, and they actually use the parking to get people out in a community situation, which is a lot of what the planning projects, the 2030 plan and all of those, that's things that they look at, is using parking as a strategy to get people out and commingling. So that 172.11 is a deal killer. It is not applicable to this. It is not single family specifically that we're talking about. And in the PZD, you have the ability to look at anything you want, and the community can come forward and voice concerns about anything you want and get the owners and the developers and everybody together in a team effort to make it something that will work. So I personally would ask you to vote that down, that it's not necessary.
Okay. Now, did I tell everybody you got one turn to the microphone unless an alderman brings you back up? But we're talking about the amendment now, and you'll get another turn to talk about the ordinance as a whole before we. Okay, I didn't say that, did I? But I'm saying that now, I guess. But I mean, that's the normal procedure. All right. Now, who would be next? Now we're talking about the amendment. Come on up, please.
I'm Suzanne Owens. I'm glad I could make it today. I actually live on the north end of Fayetteville, but I'm here because I'm a long-term citizen of Fayetteville. I've lived here. My mom's probably been in the university about 40 years. I've lived here a very long time. So the reason I am here is to speak specifically to the talk of increasing definition of family. That's not what we're speaking.
Well, we're talking about the traffic and the parking, if I understand,
Okay.
right now. But you'll get I want to keep us on topic if I can,
Okay.
and then we'll talk at the overall ordinance if this amendment passes or not passes, okay?
Okay, so specifically speaking to
The amendment, the traffic and the parking.
as a result of increasing or just for this project? I'm sorry. I
Not
just
for this
wanted-
project, for
Okay,
overall, if I understand, is, Sarah?
Only about whether to add in a requirement that the city
Right.
council consider the traffic.
Traffic
oh,
and parking.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I understand, I have a lot of friends in the community, a lot of people that, I understand it's a big issue around the university area, maybe not so much in my neighborhood except for the rental houses, but infrastructure is a huge consideration for everything we do in this city. It relates back to questions I have. Are we actually looking at what we have, our existing facilities, instead of increasing new ones, and creating heavy stress, additional stress on the roads? And traffic is huge. I don't think that anybody that's invested a lot of money into their property and is paying taxes and is a resident in Fayetteville wants to see 4 cars parked in a yard and have to wait 15 minutes to get out of the street so that they can go to work. So I think it's a huge consideration in any project that we build.
Okay,
And I ask you to consider that, and I appreciate your time.
sure. Thank you.
Mayor Jordan and council members, my name is George Roselle, and I live at 2015 Cleveland Street, just east of the corner of Sang and Cleveland. And specifically on the amendment, Mayor Jordan, I believe the amendment is a step in the right direction as far as the entire ordinance is concerned for the proposal. I would ask that there be more amendments in order to create more standards for the city council to consider. It is my position that the overall ordinance, and I know that'll be for my next talking point, but
Right.
they're so related in that the ordinance is vague and is void in its vagueness unconstitutionally for setting an unlimited scope of what the council can consider without setting standards for the consideration of each PZD. And I think that this First Amendment is a step in the right direction, specifically with any future developments that are already in consideration. And we have to remember, Mayor Jordan, that we're not here for one development today. We're here for a change of the definition of family and the amendments to that ordinance. And given the amendments proposed by Ms. Lewis, I believe that amendment in itself would create some sort of structure to any developments, because we are talking about single-family units. We're changing the definition of a family for single-family units. We're not talking primarily about multifamily units. So even though Ms. Marinoni I respect her position.
Stay with me.
Even though we respect her position, Mayor Jordan, I believe that the idea that these single-family units should be uniform and should comply with the requirements of the remainder of the city is definitely a good position for Ms. Lewis to take.
Thank you. Who would be next on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. Matthew?
Jeremy, could you clarify for me how 172.11 is applied in cluster developments where multiple units share the same parking area?
I don't know that we've had that application in the city yet.
Okay.
Currently, it's in single-family districts, and so our single-family districts really only permit a scenario currently where you have adequate frontage for that district. So RSF 4, you have 70 feet of frontage, typically a 15-foot setback. RSF 8 would have 50 feet of frontage, a 15-foot setback. So those are generally where those have been applied to date.
How would you imagine it would be applied if a new development, according to the new clustered conditional use permit?
The cottage
were to come
housing?
through? Right.
They're required to design where their parking areas are up front with that ordinance, and so we anticipated that when we drafted that ordinance. So with their dedicated parking areas that are designed up front with that particular ordinance.
Is that also typical of most PZDs we've seen historically?
It is. I mean, I think with this particular ordinance, it's really not affecting the single-family definition. It's really more affecting a PZD with a multifamily component. And the multifamily component, generally, we have parking requirements. So one parking space for every bedroom is required. And generally, if it's 5 or more parking spaces, that has to be within a parking lot, thereby meeting our parking standards. So it's going to be an asphalt or concrete parking lot or something of that nature.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I ask those questions because, well, I think this amendment is a good thing, and I'll vote for it. And it seems to me that, number one, if any project is out there, and this ordinance is not about a project, I know there's a project that many of you today are concerned about, but there was interest in that property from those people before this ordinance was on the table being considered. And no one's asking them to wait for this. That's a decision they made. In all these projects that use a planned zoning district, they have to plan for all these things. They have to plan where the parking's going to go, if it's going to be on street to make up for what's not in a driveway, or if it's all going to be in a parking area, or if it's all going to be a driveway. So it seems to me that this is a good standard to follow, and I'll vote for it.
Okay. Any other comments? Bobby?
I just wanted to establish the fact, since there already is consideration for parking and traffic, this would be considered additional consideration.
Yes, you could certainly, and I would think at any PZD, as Jeremy explains, you're looking at the parking.
Yeah.
And like some parking will be in the rear. Well,
I understand.
this particular section that usually applies to single family talks about front yard parking. It doesn't talk about parking that might be alley accessed in the rear.
And really, the reason that this was requested was specifically, I think the gentleman mentioned it, there's a possibility that people would request single-family homes with allowing 5. And that's where that specific parking regulation would apply. It's that single-family.
Applies now, doesn't it?
Right, so specifically because of, even though there's 5, because right now there's only 3 in single-family homes, right? And this would go to 5, and so.
No, no single-family zone district could have 5.
No, I understand that, but in a planned zoning district, they could have a single dwelling, right, and allow 5 people to live in it, as long as it was linked to a PZD.
As long as you all would approve a PZD within that area.
Right.
That's correct.
And so I'm saying the same parking standards should still apply. Even if we increase the number of people allowed to live in that single structure.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'll say one more thing.
Sure.
Before we get started on the ordinance as a whole, the basic premise of this amendment is if you're going to build something that looks like a house, it's got to follow the parking standards of what we apply to houses, no matter how many people are going to live in it. Now, it was said that we're changing the basic definition of family for single-family units. That's not true in the strictest sense. There's a difference between a district and a unit. And planned zoning districts can be built so that they look like houses, or so that they look like apartment complexes, or so that they look like something else. This amendment is about planned zoning districts that might come forward that look like houses. The definition for family is only going to apply to planned zoning districts. No matter what they're built like, they can come in and ask if we vote this forward that it increase to 5 people per unit, whether that looks like a house or an apartment building or whatever, if it's a planned zoning district. A single family district, which is what all of our single family neighborhoods are today, aren't affected directly by this change.
Okay. Anybody else got anything on the amendment? Do we have a motion and a second to pass it? I'm sorry. Did I miss that?
Was there a motion and a second?
I don't believe so. I would move that we pass the amendment.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to pass the amendment. All right. Any final comments on that? Lisa, would you please call the roll?
Farrell,
No.
Adams,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Gray,
No.
Boudreaux,
No.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Tennant.
No.
Mayor, the vote is 4-4, so you can vote yes if you choose to.
I will.
Okay, the amendment then passes.
Okay.
So now we're on to the regular ordinance itself.
Okay. We have the ordinance as a whole. Any comments from the council before I have public comment? Okay. We will take public comment on the ordinance as a whole. So, same rules apply.
My name is Paula Marinoni, and I'm the listing broker and part owner of Marinoni Farm, which is one property that would be affected by this ordinance. And I wanted to go first because there's a lot of misinformation out there that is unfortunate. And in the way that we were told that this needed to be brought forward, it unfortunately led to people being upset when I don't think they would be upset if they knew that this was a good thing, and why. My family, I have listed our farm, I've had it listed for about 9 years, and we've been in no hurry to sell it. We've been very, very picky, and I'm proud of my family in being also generous about this property. We want to see it be something nice for the community and something that we'll be proud of and Fayetteville will be proud of. You might remember that we offered 10 acres for the Walton Arts Center because we thought if we can do something to keep them in town, we can do that. You may not know that we were under contract with the Sam's Club. We didn't want a big box on that property, but it was important to Fayetteville at the time to have that sales tax revenue, and so we went under contract with them, and then they chose another site, which was fine. We also offered property for the high school at a reduced rate. We offered property, you might remember, on the west side of the bypass for a park at a very, very reduced rate. Before that, we offered land for the botanical garden, which very few people know about. But my family's been very interested in doing the right thing for Fayetteville. One of the things that we did not want to do was have multifamily on that property. And my sister said to me the other night, "Can you believe that we're really looking at doing multifamily? Because for all these years we've said no." I personally have said no to multifamily requests over 150 times. During the peak years, I was getting at least 2 calls a week from all over the country, and they all said, "That is the perfect place," and would say, "Yes, it is, but we're not interested." We weren't interested in traditional walk-up multifamily. And then last year, fall, I got calls. Because of the increase in enrollment at the university, it bumped Fayetteville into a new level nationally. So here came these developers. There were 4 of them that came to me. They were looking at Fayetteville, and they were looking at other properties too, not just our properties. But I told them no, and they kept on and they kept on. And finally, I looked at what they were talking about, and I couldn't believe it. I just was blown away. I was like, whoa. It was the nicest thing I had ever seen. And in our farm, what we're looking for is a synergistic development for Fayetteville and for the neighbors in that area. And I talked to them 2 years ago and showed them and told them about our plans and how it would be someplace that they could walk to a restaurant and such, but that we needed a residential component. So that's what led to this. After I saw what it was they were proposing, which is kind of like resort-style student housing, and it's very low density. People are like, "Oh, 5 people, that's high density." The reason they need the 5th person is to make up for the extreme low density. It's in this one particular developer, they're asking for 6 to 8 units per acre, as opposed to like 24 or 36 that you might see on the west side of town. What just got approved next to me, a block from me, if you average it on a little over 5 acres, was like 76 units per acre. And that's very close to Wilson Park, and there was very little objection to that on traffic or anything. And one of the first things that perked my ear about this also is going back to my long association with working with neighborhood associations going back to 1996. and this issue of it being a problem with too many people in a house. And what I saw in looking at this was that I thought, oh my gosh, this is a whole community of little houses, cottages for students, where they can have their own community. So the students that want to get a house, why? Because they cost share, and it's fun to move in with a bunch of kids. So if they had a community that was their own, it would take a lot of the stress off of traditional neighborhoods. Part of the fear that I heard was like, say, in Wilson Park, that someone would come in and do this. So I wanted to share with you and everyone, in the last 12 months, there have been 8 properties in the Wilson Park demographic that have sold, and the average sale price was $268,000. So let's say someone wanted to do a planned zoning district, and why do it if you don't have at least an acre? Those lots are a 1/4 acre, so let's say you could find 4 of them all together. You would be paying over $1 million for the acre to get at that dirt. Now, in this amendment, it says 1, 2, let's say it's 3-story, you cannot make that work. Even if you could find 4 properties together for $125,000 in Wilson Park area, which is not going to happen, that's still prohibitive. That's still $500,000 an acre, and you cannot make that work. The only way you can make that work is to go up, and that's not going to happen. I want to also give you some numbers because people are concerned about the density and the traffic. We were excited about this because, like I said, it's extremely low density. There are yards, there's natural areas for the water absorption and the runoff and places for them to throw the football and stuff. At 8 units per acre, which is the maximum they're talking about on 30 acres, that's 240 units. With a 5th person, which is necessary to make that low density work, that brings it, let's say you've got an average of 4.2, that's 1,008 beds. As opposed to on 30 acres, if you did 24 units per acre, that's 720 units at 3.5, which would be a maximum of 4 people, which is 2,520 units. And what I told the people at the Council of Neighborhoods, I mean, just specifically on our property, if this got voted down because of the people that just don't want our property to develop, we could turn right around and request multifamily, and that would be a lot higher density. So I wish that people could see how nice it is. It's the nicest thing I've ever seen. Every major college campus around here, University of Oklahoma, University of Missouri, the Texas schools, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, they all have this product to offer. And it could even be in the future detrimental to the university in competing if they don't have something like this. So my gratitude to Rhonda and Matthew for bringing this forward. The bottom line is that someone can even ask to come to Fayetteville with a new product that we have never seen before, and compared to the student housing that we have here that everyone is familiar with, I will tell you it raises the bar about 6 notches. And I'm hopeful that we will have the opportunity to bring this forward and show you what a nice product this is. And I'm confident that this will be what projects will be compared to in the future as to, okay, we want it to be like this over here. The 5th person is not to pack more people in, but to compensate for the low density. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, who would be next?
Hi, Maria from Mayor Druding and the council. I would just like to ask you to move, please, very carefully. All the experience I've had with PZDs, there seems to be a common theme in that trying to reduce the number of cars in parking lots, like you have parking on the street and stuff, rather than, it seems like there's always trying to kind of skimp on the parking, just the ones I've seen. A lot of this seems to come forward. Right now, in our neighborhoods, and I realize this is only for PZDs, it's not for the neighborhoods we have now, we have three non-related people in a house. I think just about every neighborhood in this city realizes that three unrelated people in a house means you have 6 occupants. And I can show you that on my street everywhere. I mean, there are 6 cars there every morning, and I doubt that most of the students actually own 2 cars each. If the students are not an issue, you know, granted, we're not going to cause trouble, but we don't have a mechanism to enforce our 3 people per house. Now, if we go up to 5 people per unit or house or whatever, then you're going up to a potential of 10. And the amount of parking necessary for these people is going to be astronomical. And obviously, I can't imagine any PZD that's going to have enough parking space unless they have like 2 layers of parking under the house to accommodate a potential of 10 cars. And I think that's something that we need to really look at. And I'm not saying that we should never look forward to changing things at all, but I think before we move forward with something that drastic, which eventually will, I realize you're saying this is not going to be in the neighborhoods, but if you have enough PZDs with 5 people per household, eventually this will start to move out into the neighborhoods. And I think we need to get a grasp on controlling 3 unrelated people in a house first, or some mechanism to make sure that we're not overrun with cars. As it is right now, you know, the neighbors' yards are being torn up because cars are parking on the lots, because most houses can't park 6 cars without having them on the grass or on the street. If you're going up to 5, then we're talking a substantial increase, even up towards 10. And I think we need to have something in place that we can actually control. Okay, if there are going to be 5, then we need to make sure that we don't actually have 10. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay, who's next?
Again, my name is George Roselle, and I'm a resident on Cleveland Street. There are just a couple questions, and I appreciate the previous speaker for her touching on enforcement. That is one of my major issues. I will let her words stand, and in lieu of mine, there are 2 major questions that I have for the council and for the mayor to consider. I think they're very important. The first major question is, why is the change necessary? There aren't a lack or a void of plans coming through for student housing or student development with the current rules as they stand. There also aren't people beating down the door necessarily to come in and change neighborhoods to PZDs or to develop new PZDs for 5 individuals. We've done perfectly fine within the community with 3 individuals. The Unified Development Code, which is adopted nationwide by cities and municipalities, has adopted the measurement of 3 as being an important figure to protect the surrounding neighbors. And I think that's what's so important here, is we're trying to protect the surrounding neighbors, which leads me to my second point, that the ordinance as it is written today does not provide the procedural safeguards. It actually states very specifically that with proper safeguards such as requiring that each 5-person unit be placed within a freestanding structure of not more than 2 stories, such as requiring a buffering zone. So those aren't even safeguards that are implemented into the ordinance. So really it sets you guys with just a blank page as to what you're going to consider for each PZD, which if I'm a PZD developer, I sure don't want not to know what you're going to be considering. And if I'm a resident living nearby, I also don't want to know what you're considering as to what I need to voice an objection to or my support for. And because of that vagueness in the statute, I think that it's unconstitutional on its face, and I would hate for the council not to be able to consider this in the future because of such a void or vague, or such a void within the actual language of the ordinance. My third point is that something that's been discussed is that this will alleviate pressure, this will alleviate congestion in the current single-family neighborhoods that we have. Well, the problem is we don't have any evidence to support that. As was mentioned before, we have an issue of enforcement as it stands right now. Now, with that issue of enforcement, why is somebody going to move out of their home that they've got a year lease in that's 2 blocks from the university or a mile from the university, or maybe it's in a quiet street down in East Fayetteville? Why is somebody going to move away from that home and to move into this area if they're perfectly fine living with 4 roommates? I mean, if they've already got all their girlfriends there every night, and they've got five or six cars out there, and nobody's causing any problems or going to Mr. Jones and reporting them, what's to make them move? And so what's really to entice them to leave their current safe, quiet, single-family residence where they actually can get some studying done? And again, I want to implore on the council and Mayor Jordan not to consider this simply for one development, that it's setting a precedent for future developments to come in and to change the way that Fayetteville is structured. It also actually opens it up for cities, or not cities, excuse me, for neighborhood associations to come before you and ask for their area to be rezoned into a PZD. Now, I don't know how that's going to affect with multifamily units, but I know that there are condo developers that are still on majority stake in their POAs. They'd love to be able to squeeze 5 people in there if they can. And so we look at this as opening up a Pandora's box, so to speak, of other possibilities. Whereas right now, there's no one shown me the evidence that we actually need to open up anything. That I think that this project that's being considered can be developed viably without having to require 5 individuals be in one house. And I mean, I've lived next door to 5 college students. I've seen the 10 cars. It didn't bother me. You know, I'm close enough to college age that I accepted it as what it was, and I enjoyed it. I mean, they're nice guys, and they never caused me any problems. But at the same time, I've seen what they can do to a house. And I've seen that house fall apart in a year faster than I did in 10 before. And what's to keep these structures and these properties from falling apart quicker than they should have and leaving neighborhoods with dilapidated homes 15 years from now? And those are my issues, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. That's fine.
So specifically speaking to the talk of altering or changing the definition of family to 5 unrelated people in one home, I hear a lot of talk about a specific project or students or a certain part of the town. I'd like to take it to a little bit more of a global level. The gentleman mentioned setting a precedence. It may be today that it only applies in this situation, but I've seen this happen when there's one case that's approved, then somebody else is going to want it, somebody else is going to want it, why not me? And it does open up a Pandora's box, so to speak. I've had great examples in my own residential neighborhood with 3 students living in a home that were wonderful. I've had terrible examples of people that were not students that were unrelated living in a home. The bad example I've had even involved law enforcement. So my ask is that we consider, even if we're talking about students today, and ideally students would live in these places, what's going to happen when it's no longer the cool thing and unrelated people that are not students possibly cohabitating for reasons other than to go to school and save money. And I'm afraid that it's a gateway to activity that we don't want in this city. I think of Betty Jo Drive. So that's all I'm asking you to seriously consider. You know, we've talked about traffic. The more people you have in one place, the more traffic it creates, the more noise it creates, the more trash it creates. And I'm just seriously questioning why we're even looking or talking about that option. I also think there's a lot of apartment complexes, places for university students to live, existing in this city. I don't know what those occupancy rates are. I don't have any of that sort of data, but I hope that that sort of data is being looked at or considered. What can we do to the student housing that we already have available in this city to make it more appealing to students? Maybe it's more affordable and more accessible by leveraging transportation. I don't know what the answers are, but those are just some things that I wanted to bring forward to you for consideration, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Let me ask the aldermen that are sponsoring this a question. This is being brought forward, from what I understand from your statement, this is not because of any single development. Is that correct?
That's
Or-
correct.
Matthew?
That's correct.
Yeah, I want to make that clear for the record, and that the ordinance that is being brought forward will not affect the traditional neighborhoods. Is that, I mean, this is only for new development under PZD, correct?
That's right.
Okay, I just want to be sure that that's clear to everybody, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Now, who would be next? Good evening, Don.
Don Connor, 1686 Shadow Ridge in Fayetteville. 2 weeks ago at the council meeting, I brought up the possibility of the ordinance being misconstrued. Is, you know, they'll read the headline that says 5 people per household, and it'll spread to the outside world. And you know, I realize that this body is looking at it strictly as a PZD, and they're trying to make sure that they keep it that way. But the reality of it is, the speakers after me from the student government were talking about how wonderful it would be to have 5 people living in a house all over town. So they didn't get it after it was explained to them up here on that. So I still think that there's a real possibility that even if it is set up just for PCDs, and you know, that's what this ordinance is asking for, that it's going to create a situation that people really won't understand the fact that they're only allowed 3 in a single family neighborhood. You know, we still have the problem in our neighborhood and several other neighborhoods through the Council of Neighborhoods. We hear about it every time we meet. And we try to get something done about it. And it's the same story. So, you know, you've got 4 and 5 people, and it generally exacerbates itself to having a person with that person, so they'll end up 8 to 10 cars parked in a yard and that sort of thing. And when they're talking about, for instance, on this one particular project that was brought up, where you've got 8 homes per acre, and well, that's at 5 per home, that's 40 cars right there, plus the people that are going to be with them, that's another 40 cars. So you've got 80 parking spaces you got to come up with the 8 homes on 1 acre. And I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can put 80 cars and 5 houses on 1 acre. You know, so that's just what I'd like to bring to it there.
Thank you, Don. Folks, usually we don't allow applause. I know we've done this about 3 or 4 times, and I know everybody's supported one another, but it's let's keep it to a minimum if you would, please, or not at all. Who would be next?
Hi, my name is Delora Hughes, and I live at 927 Hall Avenue, which is pretty close to the corner of Hall and Cleveland. Also, for purposes of disclosure, I guess I should say I'm the president of the University Heights Neighborhood Association. I don't speak today on behalf of the Neighborhood Association. I just thought I'd offer a couple of my own personal thoughts, and then I'll let you know when I'm sharing maybe something from an email that I've received from some of the folks in the neighborhood. While I understand that this is not about any one particular project, and I think that's a great thing, that it's really designed at least to be about the larger city as a whole, I think that when we say that it's not going to affect, or it doesn't have the potential to affect, our traditional neighborhoods, I think we might be misspeaking a little bit. There is a rezoning request that's going to go forward soon that's at the corner of Hall and Cleveland, which is in the middle of the University Heights neighborhood. And that rezoning will be, they are requesting to be a PZD. Now, I'll understand that right now there is not the intent to request an increase or 5 people. If this passes, they would have the ability to do that. That is in a traditional neighborhood. That's in my neighborhood. And while I do personally support the nature of PZDs, I love the additional process things going before the Planning Commission and then the City Council, people having an opportunity to speak to the planning and the development and be a part of an effectual process, I still am concerned about this increase in the number of unrelated people and the change in the definition of family. From what I'm hearing in my neighborhood, and I would say I echo those same concerns, it's not about students being bad or whatever. I enjoy the students in my neighborhood. I wouldn't be in this lovely city if it were not for the students. I teach at the university. But I am concerned about the long-range plan. And I think that this is potentially a really great proposal, maybe down the road, but I'm not sure about the timing and whether or not this is something that we could table to the future after we've had an opportunity, the city, the council, members of the community, members from neighborhood associations around town, to talk with the university to develop a companion plan for enforcement. The things I'm hearing over and over again, and I would echo those too, our street, Hall Avenue, connects Weddington and Cleveland. Large traffic problems, even with the small apartment complex that's there now. This rezoning that this one project is requesting is going to take 3 residential homes and that apartment complex and request a PZD. That is a huge change in the nature of our neighborhoods. Directly across the street from university housing, it's directly across the street from an elementary school, and it's going to change the nature of the street I live on and walk on every day, as well as the center and the heart of our neighborhood. What I would ask for is not that this gets necessarily voted down, but at least that it gets tabled until long-range plans for enforcing the wonderful rules that we have now, and having a secondary discussion with the university about how we're going to work with them for the increase in students. I don't think we can change the fact that there's going to be more. There's more this year than there were last year. There's going to be more next year. What that says to me is not necessarily to change the rule, but to focus on enforcing the rules we have and developing a plan for how we're going to anticipate this growth, both from a housing perspective, but also from an infrastructure perspective. And now to add a couple of comments from folks in the neighborhood. Again, I would say, I'm sorry I came in late, so I missed some of the comments, but traffic and issues for enforcement appear to be the primary things that we're hearing over and over again. We had a meeting this past Sunday just to hear what the neighborhood thought. Some members from, representatives from Sang Valley came as well, and that appears to be the primary issue. So what I would ask would be if it is possible to allow for additional time to find out what the university's plans are, to figure out how we can address the issue of both traffic and enforcement. That would seem to me to be a more prudent plan and a more thoughtful plan than just an immediate change today. Thank you.
Okay, who would be next? Come on up. Who would be next? Okay, I'll bring it back to the council.
I would like to move that we table this for 2 weeks. This will give us an opportunity to have a forum with the mayor at the open house, with your indulgence. And there is a lot of misunderstanding of the impact and the implication that this will have on the community. This is in no way endorsing anything. It's just giving us time to talk about it. As Ms. Hughes mentioned, if you do research and look at other university communities, such as the University of Texas and Austin, as well as other campuses, they do have an enforcement policy with their students, and they have worked directly with the university so that there is some responsibility with students that live in this really resort, according to Ms. Marinoni's housing. That does not seem to be in place with the University of Arkansas at this time. So with the indulgence of the City Council, I would like to think that we could delay this at least for 2 weeks and look at a companion plan with the university, as well as an enforcement plan with our code enforcement. It's been mentioned that this has been delayed already a long time. Well, February, I believe it was February 8th is the first time that we saw this, or somewhere around then at City Council.
So to be considered in City Council, this has not been in front of us a long time. It was February 28th at the Council of Neighborhoods that most of the neighborhood associations first heard of this to have a discussion on it. It is an implication for the long term here in Fayetteville. And I think that we must look at this with a responsible, forward-thinking enforcement plan, as well as a companion plan with the university administration. Thank you.
Do we have a second on the table?
I'll second it.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment after.
Yes, Brenda.
Well, do I have to, if you've had a second, then I just have to respond to tabling, because I really have something to say in regard to some of the statements in support of tabling. Well, I guess. Okay.
Well, I think you can.
All right.
That's all right.
I think the enforcement of the existing ordinance has made this obviously a very big issue. And Mark's suggestion that the university can work and we can get all this worked out in a couple of weeks is not going to happen, because I know code enforcement has worked with or the Community Services Division, who's over code enforcement, and also they have worked with the student housing people at the University of Arkansas. They've had a lot of conversations about how to make this work. And I think the real issue here is the way the enforcement of the ordinance is being done now. And the city attorney, I want to ask him to kind of review very quickly what he talked to me about before the meeting. I'm chair of the Ordinance Review Committee, and he suggested that that we need to look at another way of handling this ordinance. And so if you don't mind, I'd like to let him just briefly talk about what he's proposing come to the Ordinance Review Committee for revision.
I was discussing with Alderman Lewis and Alderman Adams, about the concerns that we have continually heard about trying to better enforce our over-occupancy situation. As you now know that we have tried to do it, I know that planning has worked many times and resolved situations. If they cannot, then they can refer to the city prosecutor. The problem with that, there's two major problems. One is timing and one is ability. If you go into the criminal situation, there's always going to be a very substantial amount of time, because first planning will try to resolve the situation, they'll try to investigate it, and then they have to find enough facts to present to the city prosecutor to show the city prosecutor he has a case, to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this is occurring. Well, that's very difficult. Cars in the street, people walking in and out of the house, those are suspicious circumstances. Those are things that would give rise to a reasonable suspicion that there are too many people living in that house. But does that really meet the standard of beyond reasonable doubt? In most cases, it would not. It would take another kind of major investigation, as the city prosecutor has done in the past, but rarely. And even if you do that, then we're two other problems. First, you have a considerable amount of time, even after charges are filed. Then you have several weeks before you would get to even an arraignment. If they plead not guilty, you've got months before the trial is going to be held. Then if you get a conviction, you get really a relatively small fine, because it's only an ordinance violation. It's not a big crime violation. And so our experience has been is that this is really not very effective, that a landlord who wants to thumb his nose at the city and continue to collect rent for more people that are there than should be there can probably make more money during the period of time we're trying to prosecute them than the fines we will receive. And so we need to find a way to make it not pay for someone to break the law. And in looking at what we could do, I looked a little bit at the procedures we have for the business license, and I believe we can have a civil enforcement procedure. And that's what I've discussed with Sarah and Rhonda, and a little bit with Brenda, and also I've talked to Jeremy and Don about this, and the mayor. A civil process would be much, much faster. a civil process could be based upon reasonable suspicion, which means facts not beyond a reasonable doubt, that if a complaining neighbor came to Jeremy and presented a verified complaint, and Jeremy could determine enough facts, which could be affidavits from neighbors or photographs or other things like that showing too many cars, affidavits from neighbors saying 10 people walk out of that house every morning. That's enough for reasonable suspicion, even though it would not nearly be enough for a prosecution. At that point in time, my suggestion would be that if Jeremy believes there's reasonable suspicion, that he would send a notice to the landlord, to the owner of the property, and say there's a due process show cause hearing that will be held within 8 to 12 days, business days, in front of the highest civilian authority in the city, which would be, unfortunately, Don Marr objected to this, but it'd be Don Marr, the chief of staff.
I like that.
At that point in time, when the hearing would be held, then Jeremy would present all the evidence that he has, the facts, and they must be facts, affidavits, things like that, to Don. And if Don felt that yes, this was reasonable suspicion that there was over occupancy in this house, then Don would turn to the landlord and say, you now have the burden to prove that that's not correct. And the landlord had every right to present evidence, argument saying, you know, that's not correct, they're really not there, or I've taken care of the problem, or whatever he might want to say. At that point, Don would have many options. One, he could say, oh, there are not too many people there. Landlord, you're right, so dismiss it all. Or he could say, well, landlord, there were too many people there before this started, but I see you've kind of corrected the problem. But I don't want it to immediately reoccur, so I'm going to withhold judgment for 6 months and see if, in fact, you will maintain the proper residency and occupancy of this house for the next 6 months. He could, if it's been well proven with no good excuse, he could say that water service and the rest of city services will be cut off within about 5 business days. Now, we cut off water service when people don't pay their bills, unfortunately, many, many times every month. We also require that before a new building gets water service, that they must get a certificate of occupancy. They must show that they're in compliance with our zoning ordinances. So it's reasonable for them to remain in compliance with this zoning ordinance that requires a certain number of residents. So I think that this would meet constitutional muster. I think it's within your power. I think that this has been a problem that's been shown to occur and would be very difficult to enforce in the criminal justice system. I think it could be much more quickly enforced here. I think that in this particular system, the landlord would lose money, not make money, and so would be much more inclined to follow the law. Now, obviously, this needs a complete review by the City Council, and that's why I talked to Alderman Boudreaux about going to her committee, the Ordinance Review Committee, reviewing all this, even though I do have a draft ordinance I've already presented to Alderman Adams and Alderman Lewis about that, because they requested me to do that. And so I did that, and I think that that's how you really attack the enforcement. This other thing that's before you right now, the definition, that does not have to do anything with enforcement. That is just, does the City Council want to have a new tool that they could allow in a PZD with these various protections with it? So it has really nothing to do with enforcement, but we do need to attack enforcement. And so that I was requested to do something like that, and so that's what I drafted up for the aldermen. I invite them to comment.
Yeah, no, that's great. And
Bobby, I'll take please.
Yeah, I got 2 questions, Kit. Number one, would they get to confront their accuser? In other words, would the complainant be compelled? Because a lot of times I get complaints from people and they don't want to be involved. They want the city to handle it. In a case like this, would the complainant get to face? Would they face the accuser, the one that's harboring the complaint? Number one, and number two, why couldn't we just? If I don't favor this at all, but why couldn't you just empower the code compliance department with something that says if we overall feel, and it might take the mayor's or whoever's agreement, that we cut their water off? Why create another bureaucracy? Why couldn't you do that?
Because citizens have due process rights.
I got you.
And they have a right not necessarily to confront their accuser, but to listen to any evidence that's against them and to rebut that and present any arguments they might have to show why that is not correct.
So when a citizen's water is cut off now, there's due process. They're not called and said, we're gonna cut your water off if we don't get paid.
No, they are notified if they do not pay their bill, they're gonna have the water cut off. But this is for something that's independent of paying the bill, and therefore I think we really do need to have a due process hearing. I would not recommend not doing that. I think that we want to avoid any problems or any mistakes and where we would cut off the water when we should not.
I think we got a loose nut and we're trying to build an erector set, so I think on this deal, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I can assure you one thing, when you shut somebody's water off, then the mayor gets to get involved in the due process, whether he wants to or not. Yes, Sarah?
I want to just thank you for drafting this, and I am very supportive of it being reviewed at Ordinance Review Committee as a draft that we can consider. It is the thing since well before I was on the council, talking about the Council of Neighborhoods. This is something that's just a constant issue in our community, and we need to address it directly head on. And however that comes out, we need to be looking at this. And I would therefore ask that this project be tabled and be in coordination with this and come back to the council together, and with the idea, because we need to, I'm not supportive of increasing the density. I am supportive in general of density and walkability and more areas where people can live in close quarters, and there's commercial and there's mixed use. That is, I love that. But I really don't feel like, I feel like the timing is a little bit early in that I don't feel like we're ready. We need to grow some other things at the same time. And so in concept, I like this idea, and I probably eventually will support it, but right now I feel like we need to look at some other things and then come back to this and think about it.
I will accept a friendly amendment to bring this back with the ordinance. And you're
As
the
far as the
second.
tabling?
Yes.
Yeah, I second that.
Do we not vote on the tabling first?
They can, the motioner and the second can change their motion if they wish. It went from tabling it, I guess, for 2 weeks to tabling it until the other ordinance is ready to be
And that way we can
back
consider
at
them
City
together,
Council.
yes.
Matthew?
Well, with all due respect to my fellow council members, I can't support the new tabling amendment. I think that we're capable of considering both of these things as they are and making a decision about either one of them. I do want to respond to a couple things a couple of concepts that have been brought up. The first is the idea that this could somehow spread to regular neighborhoods. I was wondering, when was the original definition for family passed?
The one that I worked on with the chairman of the planning commission, who was Bob Estes, and Tim Conklin, who was the city planner, was back about 2002.
Okay.
I think they might have had a definition before that, but the one that you're looking at right now, that's when it was worked on.
I was on the council when we did the first one, but I can't remember. I want to say 2002 or
2 or 3, somewhere in there.
along in there.
So
It was fun.
10 years ago, there was an ordinance passed that said limit of 3 in single-family units, limit of 4 in multifamily units. And when people tell me that allowing someone to ask for 5 people in a custom zone is going to spread to single-family neighborhoods, my response is, why hasn't the definition of 4 in multifamily spread to single-family neighborhoods? It absolutely has not. The definition today is 3 people in single-family districts, and it's been that way since the ordinance was passed. And it's 4 since the ordinance was passed in multifamily districts. I was wondering if I could see a show of hands of everybody who likes living in Fayetteville the way it is today. Yeah, just about everybody. Me too. Me too. In fact, whenever I came to Fayetteville 10 years ago, I was ready to leave Arkansas, and I was so pleasantly surprised to land in Fayetteville because I love it here. I like it the way it is. But Fayetteville's growing between 2 and 3%, which is a doubling rate of between 23 and 35 years. So that means by 2035 or so, that there's going to be 152,000 people in this town. 152,000 people in Fayetteville. It's mind-boggling. And if we were to develop, we talked about infrastructure, if we were to get 152,000 people in this town with the exact same housing mix we have today, that means 300 miles of new roads. That's a cost of $600 million to the community. You can check those numbers at the university. So that's 76,000 new people, 300 miles if we do it exactly like we have it today. That's not talking about water pipes and all the other kinds of infrastructure that goes along with 76,000 new people. So to me that says we probably need to do something a little different than the exact housing mix we have today. It doesn't mean everything needs to change, but it means a little bit of change needs to be made. So for me, when I consider that today we have a growth rate of between 2 and 3%, which is that doubling rate of between 24, 23, and 35 years, that the timing is right to start making those tiny changes. And this is one way of doing that. Now the university has spoken. We can say we're going to take a little time and go talk to the university about a companion plan, but they're not in the business of doing citywide plans. They're in the business of doing university plans, and they've spoken. They've said no more housing on campus. They've got what they're going to do, and they're not going to do any more. We could pass a resolution as a council that says we don't like what you said, university, but that's not going to change their minds. They're not going to build any more housing, which means the community and the private sector has to start to make up for it. One of the comments we had tonight was that someone thought that we brought this forward on the predication that it was going to relieve pressure in the neighborhoods. And that's not true at all. This has been brought forward because 76,000 new people are expected to move here in the next few decades. And we are expecting increased pressure, and that needs to be relieved. And there's a difference between relieving increased pressure in the future and relieving pressure that's there now. Somewhere we've got to hold the line on the way our neighborhoods look today. And that means allowing areas of town to develop in different ways than they have in the past. There are areas like one of the projects that has been discussed tonight that needs to be developed. And because 76,000 new people are going to be here, we have to do that a little bit differently than what we might have seen in a neighborhood that was built 30 years ago. We just have to find a way to do it a little bit differently. And this is a small change for properties like that. Very small change. And I think that's why we need to do that today.
Okay. Adele.
Well, as I listen, it seems to me that the overriding biggest problem is enforcement. Whether it's 3 people in a house or 10 people or 5 people in a house, whichever ordinance we take. So I'm certainly supportive of the Ordinance Review Committee looking at a new way to enforce. I certainly am. I am not in favor of postponing any farther. For one thing, 2 weeks from tonight is spring break, and I will not be here, and I cannot vote, and I want to vote on this issue. So I will not be in favor of tabling for any length of time unless it's after spring break. And I do not, I hate to slow down projects because we're accused of that as a city enough. So I would like to see us vote tonight to take care of this and be assured that our attorney and our committee will come up with a good way of enforcing, of making improvements in our enforcement. And as a part of that, I would like that we have a review in 6 months. See if we've been able to take care of issues that our community has brought to us. Because, I've heard many complaints about right now with the rules we have. So I think enforcement is the key, and I'm all for that, but I'm not in favor of tabling.
Mark? Better step down. Go ahead.
I don't think the university has spoken. I haven't seen anyone in front of city council that has spoken to this. Am I wrong? We've had some students, and I do respect their opinion and their right to speak, but I would like an open dialogue with the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, or Dean of Students, that office, because they do have an office right now that's looking at off-campus housing that's serious, as mentioned by ASG. And I would like to have input directly in front, presented to City Council before I support this specific change, because that way we will have on record a dialogue. We do not have that currently, I'm sorry.
Okay. What are the thoughts? Rhonda?
Well, I want to say, first of all, thank you, citizens, for your input and for showing up and for emailing me and calling me and giving me a lot of really good information. I continue to believe this is still a good ordinance. I did not do this for any specific piece of property. I've said that from the beginning, and in fact, I've been called in the last week and told that the whole Marinoni property thing was off, and did I want to pull it? No. I still think it's a good piece of legislation, and I did not do it for a specific ordinance. I did it because I think it's a good planning tool for our city. I didn't do it for students, though I care very deeply about students and the university, but I did it because I think it's a good planning tool at a time when we have a swelling population and where infill is something we have to consider. And I think it allows developers to come speak to us and to ask for something that we cannot hear from developers now. And I continue to believe that a PZD is a rigorous and complex, goes through a complex review process where we would invite lots of input and lots of considerations. Again, I will say I believe you've elected a council now that can consider things that have to be considered in a PZD in a much better and more effective way than an appointed commission or board can do so. This proposal does not change what happens in our existing neighborhoods. It does not change it. Nothing by right happens over this proposal. It does not open doors. And I keep hearing that. This opens the door, this opens the door. I don't know why people keep saying that. It doesn't open a door. It allows a developer to ask your elected city council to look at something that it cannot look at now. Clearly, this has struck a nerve. I regret, I'll use that word, it's made me, I regret that it has become all about the number of people living unrelated in a house and what a family is. It seems, I did not expect that, but clearly what it's done, that's good. What I don't regret, what I'm very happy about that it's done, is that it's caused us to have really good conversations about enforcement and the awareness that what we're doing right now is not making our citizens very happy in our neighborhoods. It's not working right now. Every single email that I have received, no exception, has complained about the lack of enforcement in the neighborhood. Every single one of them. It's been about enforcement. So I understand that it's become an emotional issue. People have been very angry with me. That's not fun, but I can take it and I appreciate it because I've listened carefully. The people who are angry are mostly angry about enforcement. And I kind of said that I feel like we as a city have lost some credibility. I don't blame the staff or the mayor or the council, but I think one of the reasons people are so angry is our credibility in creating something new and possible is gone. And I wish we could build that back, build up some credibility with our citizens. So I think we've avoided that issue long enough, and it's time to address it, and I'm all for looking at something. before ordinance review. It's time to take it on, but I'd like to leave this proposal on. I think it's timely and needed, and I appreciate, again, thank you all for your comments and conversations about this issue. Thank
So
you.
I take it that you're opposed to tabling?
I am.
All right. Bobby, you had comments to make?
Yeah, Mayor, I was just gonna say, with all due respect to everybody, and along the lines of Matthew, I can remember as a kid when this town had a population of 9,000 or something, and it's continued to grow. And I can remember reading the newspaper, which I refer to as a Daily Disturber, for years and years. And you know, there's segments of society. Some people move in and it's Mecca. You know, they want to close the door behind them. That's a small minority. Other people are concerned about, they want good neighborhoods, they want a good place to raise a family, and I think that's what we're all after here. I think that no matter where an applicant chooses to try to bring one of these to the council, you're going to see a tremendous amount of scrutiny, as evidenced by tonight. I don't expect that if one comes, the house will be packed if and when one ever comes to the council. I guess just in closing, I would like to vote on this tonight, but I have to, in deference to Mark, you know, we've always kind of honored someone's petition to table. What's the date this is tabled for, Mark, if I can ask?
It's indefinite. It would be when the enforcement resolution comes out of ordinance review. It would be at the same time as that, so they could be considered in tandem.
I'm not going to break my record. I'll stand. I'll honor the. I don't want to, but I will.
Can I ask a question about that? So it's an indefinite tabling. How long does ordinance? I mean, I'm not worried about the timing either.
I can schedule something next week if all the ordinance review committee members are, you know, can attend.
It could take multiple meetings.
Right, it could take several meetings.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like it's such an improvement that it probably wouldn't be that controversial. You know, well, it might be with Bobby, but
No.
I think most people would really favor some way of enforcing this.
As long as you can get something everybody agrees on, I think it's.
Okay. Well, we're dealing with the tabling right now. Has anybody else got any more comments on the table?
I would like to follow up on Bobby's. It is my concern that there is a feeling that there has not been there's been a lot of opinions expressed on this, but there has also been a lot of confusion and a lot of misunderstanding of the implications of this, and so I do think that that's why I wanted to table it at least for a short while. And believe you me, all of us on City Council are getting banged on this a lot, and I can understand someone wanting to put it to rest, but that's not the type of leadership that I'm going to offer to my ward.
So,
well, may I add that that would not be the reason I would support not tabling this? Because, well, yeah, but I mean, that would not be the reason I would not support not tabling this. It would be because I feel like we have discussed this. We pass ordinances all the time that not everyone in the world agrees upon. We try to make as many compromises and concessions as we can, and I think there's been some amendments made to this to make it more possibly acceptable to some of the concerns. But, you know, I think that we're dealing with two things here, and one of them is an ordinance that I know is violated and that people are you know, it disrupts their neighborhood, and I can appreciate that, and I think we do need to try to address that. And if there's a way that we can, then we need to do that. But I think this is a different issue. I think this is a proposal that I think is very innovative, and a lot of cities, college towns do this to provide housing for a student population. And I think it's worth a try. It's an enabling legislation allowing, you know, a developer to come to the City Council with a proposal for a PZD that allows kind of an innovative way of student housing. Whether or not that's going to be compatible with the neighborhood is something that we consider with any planned zoning district. That's why this coming to us as a planned zoning district, within a planned zoning district, makes it acceptable to me, something that we can consider, because we will look at it. The citizens that any of these planned zoning districts are adjacent to will have ample opportunity to discuss their concerns, and so I think it's a good concept. I do not see it spreading. I mean, this idea of it spreading doesn't even, I don't see that happening. We are responsible to the citizens. We all on this council have a lot of concerns about your problems that you do have in existing neighborhoods with students living in more students than you want in one house. So I don't see why we would all of a sudden just start allowing this to happen all over town. We created this ordinance limiting it to 3 within a household since I've been on the council, and it was in response to citizens' concerns about it. Whenever we talked about the ordinance in the beginning, we knew, it was discussed at quite, many meetings through the Ordinance Review Committee and through some other public meetings, through, I think, Community Services, and there were a lot of concerns about how we could enforce it. We knew that was going to be an issue, but we passed this ordinance in response to neighbors' concerns about student housing in their neighborhoods. So I don't see this spreading, but I do see it as a innovative tool for providing more student housing, and I think the review that will be offered by the City Council will be good. So, I'm supporting this ordinance, and I don't see any point in tabling it, even though I normally respect that, but I think there is some urgency in this. I think that's been expressed. It's gone through 3 full readings. It has gone through 2 ward meetings. It has gone through the Council of Neighborhood meetings. I don't really know how much more we could review this. And so that's why I don't support tabling it.
Okay. Any other comments on the tabling? There's some great comments being made, but I'm just trying to figure out whether we're going to table this thing or not. Yes, Sarah.
Just to reiterate, is the reason I think tabling would be important and worth it is one of the difficulties is we have definitions, and there's a request to add additional definition, and right now the definitions are fuzzy because we're not enforcing. The enforcement is questionable. We are enforcing it, but it's very, very hard. So why add another definition until we can do a better job of enforcing the definitions we have? And that's why I'm asking to table it until we can catch up with enforcing our current definitions, and then consider adding the 5 people. So that's the defense of tabling it until we can consider the enforcement of our current definitions, and then think about, can we handle a new definition?
Any other comments on tabling? All right. The motion is to...
You're going to explain the motion, but does tabling...
Yeah, the motion is either table or not table.
And is it table?
The motion is to table.
That's correct.
Right, so the amendment is attached.
No, to come back in tandem with the revised.
Yeah.
Of course, however long that takes.
Right.
Care about that, that's fine.
Okay.
As long, and we'll just make sure Adela's back for that, whatever that is. She
Right.
needs to vote too, so, okay.
Okay, is everybody clear on everything?
And we'll have an agenda session to talk about it.
No, it was Mark and second by...
Okay. Everybody good? Lisa, would you please call the roll? A vote yes is to table.
Farrell,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Gray,
No.
Boudreaux,
No.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty,
No.
Tennant.
No. Mayor, I think it was 4-4, so I will ask you whether you wish to vote.
Well, I'll vote yes to table, in respect to the Alderman.
Thank you. It is tabled, and we're on to the next item.
All right. All right. Number one, RZN 12-4024, 1934 East Huntsville Road, Stiles. An ordinance rezoning that property described in rezoning petition RZN 12
Mayor, I think we have a public hearing.
Oh, sorry. Missed one, I'm sorry. All right, number C, public hearing one, Garland Avenue Water and Sewer Relocation Project. Resolution authorizing the city attorney to seek condemnation and possession of central lands owned by the Glenn David Wilson Trust and Linda K. Hinkle, Karen and E. and Richard L. Hanna, Bob L. and Wilma B. Bonds, Margaret Cavitson, Remington C. Hendricks, Spirit Shop Incorporated, and Donald and W. and Brenda Sue Johnston needed for water and sewer relocations along North Garland Avenue and approving a budget adjustment.
This is related to the Garland Avenue Highway 112 project. As y'all know, we're partnering with the Highway Department to make the improvements and widening to Highway 112 between North Street and Melmar. As part of that project, the city is paying 50% of the construction. We also are paying for all of the costs of the utilities and right-of-way acquisition. The Highway Department has completed their acquisition of right-of-way. The next step is for the utilities to be relocated. We are working on right now the design of the water and sewer relocations and also the acquisition of utility easements. And that's what we're here tonight to discuss. Our land agents have been acquiring the easements over the past several months, beginning in about October of last year. We've been able to acquire 50 of the 58 easements needed. We still have 8 easements to acquire, and those names were read off. So with that, I'll take any questions. I think we may have some folks in the audience that want to speak to this, but I can answer any questions for now.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, then the public hearing will be held in regards to the resolution that is before the City Council that would authorize the City Attorney's Office to file these condemnation actions.
Okay, so we'll start with public hearing.
Yes, sir.
Okay, who will be first on public hearing? It's open, folks, if you want to speak on it. Mr. Druding, I'm sure you want to speak on this. Come on in.
Hi, my name is David Druding, and I do not have property that is presently involved with this condemnation. About a year and a half ago, I did, and that's along Cato Springs Road. But in learning about this, I have gained quite a bit of experience and knowledge about how the city is proceeding right now with its eminent domain condemnations. And myself and some neighbors of mine have formed an organization called Reform Fayetteville's Eminent Domain, or Reform Fed. And I have a short written statement that I wanted to present to you. I'll actually read it, but I also have copies of it that I could give to each of you too, so that you can look it over at your own.
Sure. Bring it on up, Mr. Chair.
Is it in our staff?
There's one for everybody, so
I think I've seen it. I want to
I
be
think the clerk has provided copies.
Yeah, we got them today in our box.
Okay.
Okay, this is not what I put in your box.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
So I'll just, it'll only take a moment to read it. Fayetteville's present eminent domain condemnation procedure. From the 1874 Arkansas Constitution's Declaration of Rights, Article 2, Section 22, the right of property is before and higher than any constitutional sanction. We believe that Fayetteville's present policy offering 25 or 33% of current appraisal value for a municipal permanent or general utility easement does not meet that constitutional requirement. We request that the City Council halt their planned condemnation proceedings against another 8 Fayetteville property owners along the route of North Garland Corridor Enhancement Project. Instead, we ask they review and reform Fayetteville's eminent domain condemnation procedure before taking any further condemnation actions against its citizens. That is what was placed in your mailboxes earlier. We go on with this following paragraph. The founding members of Reform Fed experienced the same Fayetteville condemnation proceeding back in November of 2010 as the city prepared for the Cato Springs Road Corridor Enhancement Project. We observed Fayetteville's land acquisition negotiating team forgetting to include landscaping damages in impacted property owners' settlement terms and mistakenly including broad, contradictory permissible uses for the permanent easements in many of these contracts, for which Fayetteville only offers these 25 or 33% values. In addition, city staff selectively sent out a very forcefully written letter demanding that 18 of our neighbors accept what was generally believed to be a low, inadequate settlement offer or face the city's hostile condemnation proceedings on October 19, 2010. Without contacting these same citizens to correct this timetable, the city did not proceed with condemnation on that date as threatened. Several of our elderly neighbors were sufficiently intimidated and settled for the terms they did not believe to be equitable. Natural and historically significant elements, including mature 100-year-old trees, are regularly discounted and unnecessarily lost as city construction projects are planned and carried out. We deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would be next?
My name is Bob Bonds. I'm a resident of Fayetteville, and I'm one of the 8, I guess. I'm not Elite 8, but I'm one of the 8. Mayor, the best news that you could give me is I'm not out for compensation just for that. The best news you could give me is this entire project would be canceled, and we wouldn't have to lose any of our property because we think highly of our property. I've been trying to settle this with both the state and the city for quite some time. Unfortunately, it's been delayed somewhat. We've owned this property for a little over 12 years. It's been a rental property for the majority of that time. About 4 years ago, it was totaled by arsons, and we completely rebuilt it, restored it, and took a great deal of pride in it, and now our son lives in it, and he plans on making that his home, hopefully. So we have a lot of interest other than just the money. What I would expect to see is just compensation. The state, I'm in litigation or will be with the state about the best use of that property, basically, and at the encouragement of our attorneys, we have hired an independent appraiser to do an independent appraisal on it, and unfortunately that's taken quite some time. We I guess got the busiest firm around, and it's taken some time, but just yesterday we met with them and have a preliminary direction from them, and it looks like we can proceed both with negotiating with them and the city. And I spoke with the city some time ago also and told them that I would like to wait until I got that information and settled with the state so that we could get this justly done. And unfortunately, like I said, it's taken longer than I would anticipate. There's also not just the financial part. It's just in other ways too. The right of way, the state is very inconsistent on their right of way, the distance. And our property is it's approximately 25 feet of state and 10 feet from the city. So that's 35 feet that we're losing. A little over 20% of our property. Just a few hundred feet down the road, the state is only taking 19 feet. So it varies quite a bit. And I talked to the city about, well, since it's 5 feet more off us here than down there, can you decrease the size of your easement? And I realize what they need for their utilities. And unfortunately, we're losing, and I've also been told that I can still use that property to plant grass, I guess, and mow grass, but I can't put a structure on it without the fear of losing it or having it torn down in case of utilities problems in the future. So what we're wanting to do is have an opportunity to get just negotiations so that we can negotiate this and not just enter into a condemnation proceedings and not have an opportunity to either negotiate or, of course, litigate. And like Mr. David said, the difference in what the city has offered in terms of the 25% or 33% seems to differ from person to person, and also from city to city. In the larger cities to our north, I'm told that theirs is 100%, and that the public utilities would be 100% too. So I guess what we're looking for is consistency. And then also, I was offered $100 from the city in landscape and $500 from the state in landscaping. We have trees along that property. We have one of the largest magnolia trees in Fayetteville, and another magnolia tree, and about 3 pine trees. And thank goodness they screen most of that property. And once they're gone, we won't have that screen. We'll have to replace that screen. And I challenge anybody to tell me how I can do that for $600. So I guess what I'm asking for is either the council table this condemnation proceedings, or allow us an opportunity to negotiate now that we've received our information from our appraiser and from my attorney. So,
all right,
that's it. Thank you.
Hang on.
Sir, when did you hire your appraiser?
When did I hire him? I first contacted them, it was last year. It was in probably October, November.
Did you tell the city when you hired the appraiser?
Did I tell the city?
Uh-huh.
I didn't tell them when I hired the appraiser, I don't think.
Okay, and you just talked to them last week?
I'm sorry?
You just talked to your appraiser for the first time in person last week?
Oh, no, not the first time. I've been trying to get, I've been in communication with them many times over the last several weeks and months, but just had a meeting with them yet. They finally got their all their paperwork together and their direction together yesterday.
So when do you expect to get a figure from them?
I would think hopefully by the end of this week. I certainly will encourage them all I can to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Who else would like to speak on this?
How many years do you think it'll take to make Garland Avenue look decent again after this? Have you ever seen pictures of or been there when it's flooding down to the south and the pipes that'll go in? Probably under sidewalks, replacing those natural swales on Garland Avenue. We'll send that water down there faster to the folks at the lowest end, like some of them on the south side of the mountain or the ridge. And I actually, for the first time, got a new laptop and was able to open the backup material on the Granicus site and look at the drawings, which are in there, and read some of the stuff. Most people don't have access to that at all, so, and most people don't know about some of these discussions unless they have the property there or something. But yes, the amounts of money aren't enough. You can't put back the big tree that John was talking about. No telling how many years it was growing. And we can stick up all these little sprigs, which have to be watered, in holes in paved areas with red dirt underneath, so there's no recharge from that area. And there's no way that it will live without being watered constantly. So you're talking about hiring somebody to plant street trees right now. And they're making more money to plant and manage street trees and maintain them than you're paying the property owner, who loses the property probably in many cases, because you will be planting trees to try to reproduce what we lose. It's just like the pictures that are around on the internet. I have some from before I moved here of how College Avenue looked, and you just can't replace it with the little things we try to do. And so I never agreed with the Garland Avenue project as it's approved, as it's planned. And I certainly didn't agree with the Cato Springs thing. There weren't many people there the night that I went to the Cato Springs discussion that even had, gotten the message of what was going to happen and came in and talked. A few did. And we have to wonder, why the existing citizens are not going to get compensated at least for the property that they're losing. And like the man's talking about, how does he get a barrier there to protect the view? Because not everybody wants to see the traffic or hear the traffic. At the Hill Place, previously supposed to be Aspen Ridge, talked about the railroad. And people said, well, you leave the trees up there along the railroad and you've got a barrier that helps. And probably people in the apartments won't want to look level at the railroad and hear the sound blast from that close. But the developers took off the trees. And I remember one of the developers saying, well, the buildings will be a better sound barrier for the people in the neighborhood. No, buildings route the wind faster and they route the sound louder. It bounces off of it. So all those things go together. The stormwater, the trees that we are dedicated for decades now to protecting and recreating. And just finally, what excuse is there? We're narrowing streets in subdivisions, requiring the narrowing of streets. The Block Avenue project narrows the street to slow down traffic. But then we hit an artery or arterial or whatever we call Garland in its present state and say we want to make it wider and bigger, put curb and gutter down there and bury pipes and send the water rushing down faster to the old existing neighborhood. And that water from that stretch goes where? Hamstring Creek, where they've got flooding problems. So I just wonder what, and I know Mayor Matthew Petty speaks for a younger generation than most of us here and is thinking farther ahead, but even he won't maybe want the city to be the way it will be by the time we are, quote, developed out another 50 years or whatever. I wasn't here to vote. Do I like living in the city? You bet. I love it. But did I like it better when it was 20,000 or whatever it was when I first came here? Yes, absolutely. And I think that I know a lot of those. I think Mayor Mr. Farrell mentioned people who come in and as soon as they get here from California or wherever, they want to shut the door behind them because it's the way they envision it. It's magnificent. So with these things, we're reducing things of quality. The need for university housing, the sale barn, I won't even go into how happy we were to have that property become apartments. You all know that, but you voted for it this past year, because we didn't raise the money to buy it, or it wouldn't be there, wouldn't be happening. But just Rocher Hill, just to the west, in part of the center, the west center of the Town Branch neighborhood, we've got big student apartments or some kind of housing similar to what we're talking about tonight with Marinoni property and that ordinance, slated to go in on top of the mountain. It's coming through right now. And the water off there already affects the neighborhood to the east and south downstream. Excuse me, and they can't fix it. Anytime we ask engineers to say what will happen with the water flow, they say people cannot raise, I think somebody turned the sound speaker off, but I talk loud. I don't hear it coming back. there is no way to pave any large tract of property and not increase the speed of flooding. There is no example of true low impact development. Low impact, I didn't say LEED. I think we got a few of those. Except low density, leaving the soil where it was. But anyway, to the point here, I think the thing that caused me to jump up from watching it on the big screen was the discussion of the quote taking of property, as the phrase is, and the amount of compensation. Well, think about it if it's your front yard. I know where some of you live, and some of you have small yards, and if they widened your street, it would put the street real close to your house. Others have some beautiful large yards, and it wouldn't make you a lot of difference. But for these people who have in established neighborhoods, which Garland Avenue is, despite all the developments that have gone in recent years, it's certainly going to radically damage that neighborhood. So I think we ought to pay up. I'm a guy who gets a parking ticket downtown because I forgot my quarter, and I just walk in and write the check and say, I'm increasing city revenue. So the more people do what I just did and forget to pay the meter, the better it is. So if I could donate some of those little instances to help pay people for losing an important part of their property that made it beautiful and valuable and a good place to live, or even some of them losing parking and so forth for their businesses. Okay, any criticism or comments?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Who else would like to speak on this topic? Seeing none, I will close the public comments. Kit, did you want
Let
to
me
address
just
any
respond
of
to a
these
couple before the Alderman discuss the merits of this. With Mr. Bonds, I am happy that you have got an appraisal, or soon will have an appraisal, and I want to assure you that negotiation does not end simply because we are forced to file a condemnation. When you file a condemnation action, we get possession of the property so the project can go forward. If we don't do that, the project cannot go forward. So that is the only reason we're here asking you, with the city engineer, to grant the city attorney's office the right to condemn these properties, because we are told by the city engineer, I'll let him to further explain this, that we need possession of the property. To respond or answer Aubrey Shepherd's question, how will the property owners get compensated for their property, their trees? If we cannot resolve it, and I can say in the last 11 years since I've been city attorney, we have resolved every condemnation case that I ever filed. We were always able to resolve it. I brought it back to the city council, and you approved every settlement that we did with the property owners. We have not had to go to court on any of them. We might be going to court with Mr. Druding. He might be the first, but that would be the first. And if we do go to court, how is it resolved? How much will be compensated? Well, the jury decides. The city doesn't decide. The property owner doesn't decide. We can both ask the jury to make a decision in our favor, but it is the jury that decides what is the fair compensation for the amount of property, the easements that we've had to take. And I'll have some comments about what Mr. Druding said in a minute, but I wanted to clear those two things up first. Now, I don't know if our city engineer wanted to supplement that at all.
You passed out a document, Chris, right? This document about what the cities to the north are doing, so supposedly?
I have not passed that out, but
Okay.
I can go over that.
I apologize.
Well, we've gotten it.
Yeah, it went around.
It was passed,
Okay.
okay. Yes, just in response to the question about what other cities typically do, I did take a quick poll this afternoon of what some of the other cities do. And if you have that document in front of you, you can refer to it. Bentonville, they pay just on a per linear foot basis, no matter what size the easement is. Rogers, they typically pay 10 to 25% of fee simple value. fee simple value is the full value. If you were purchasing the property, you pay fee simple value. Fort Smith, they typically have easements appraised and offer whatever the appraised amount is. They said normally the appraised amount is less than the full fee simple value because an easement is just a partial taking. It's a restricted use that the city has. Siloam Springs uses 20% as their basis, and Springdale uses 25%. And just a quick note as to what the Fayetteville did on this particular project. We were able to get the Highway Department appraisals that they used when they purchased right-of-way. We did take 25% of those appraisals as a basis for our offers. From that point, as we began discussions with property owners, various property owners had differences in their property. Some of them had landscaping, trees, so we added that to their compensation. There are some instances of commercial properties where we were looking at maybe parking lots that were impacted, and then we worked with them to help mitigate those factors. So we started with 25%. We then negotiated, as we do in all cases, to solve their individual issue. At the point when we began discussion about moving forward to condemnation, we did hire a separate appraiser and do an independent appraisal of each property. They looked at it as on an individual basis. They did not use the Highway Department appraisal. They did not use any of that as the basis for their work. Those amounts that came back as far as appraised amounts came in at about 50% of the property value. So it wasn't a straight 50% because, again, they're looking at each individual property, how close the easement comes to the property, comes to the house, structure, landscaping damages, all that sort of thing are all factored in. So I think the point is each individual case is different. We do have a starting point of 25%, but then we vary from that just depending on the individual property. We don't take an across-the-board kind of approach. And I think the state law, as Kit mentioned, the state law says that the difference in the value before the taking and the value after the taking is what is fair compensation. And that's what the appraisals that we've just done were intended to do, is determine what that value is. We certainly understand that we have an obligation to the property owners to pay them fair compensation, and that's exactly what we do. But we also believe we have an obligation to all of the taxpayers to not pay more than fair compensation. That sometimes is a difficult thing to do because the property owners think they would like to have more money, obviously, but we do have the obligation to our other taxpayers to keep the cost down of all of these projects. And again, as Kit mentioned, ultimately, if this does go to court, a jury will decide what the fair compensation is. This really is just a starting point and an estimate. Finally, a reminder also that this council action authorizes the city attorney to proceed with this. If, say, in the instance of Mr. Bonds, he's got an appraisal and he's willing to come back with a counteroffer in the interim before this condemnation is filed, we certainly will continue to negotiate and try to resolve that as best we can. So this really doesn't mean we cut off all negotiations. It's just really the next step in the process. The schedule-wise, again, we're trying to meet the Highway Department's deadline this fall so they can begin construction. That means we need to begin construction probably no later than about the 1st of May. We are getting very close to the time when we'll be bumping into that deadline if we can't get these easements acquired. So I'll answer any questions.
Absolutely.
Chris, just for clarification, you mentioned that if he had if his appraisal came through, they're still you indicated the same thing that will continue even after this. If he indicated, I think maybe next week he would get a week or so. Shouldn't that allow plenty of time for that to?
As you remember, Bobby, the city council has authorized my office to file numerous condemnations. And we have continued to negotiate, especially if we can get them to appraisal.
Well, just like you said,
And been able to
you
resolve
haven't done, you resolved them all, so. yeah,
And really,
pass the resolution.
practically and logistically, we have to get checks written in order to file with the court. There's a lot of paperwork that the city attorney's office has to do, so we need a few weeks to be able to get the paperwork together. We could use that time.
I just wanted to point it out for clarification. I know we have done it several times ever since we got on this road building. It happens, but thankfully we're able to satisfy everybody before we actually have to go to court on the deal. So I just wanted that. Sounds to me like we got this thing may come out yet, but thanks, Chris.
Mayor, I just want to make a comment that the timing of our work to relocate our utilities is critical to meet the deadline for the matching funds from the state's contribution to this project. And that is why we're at that time-sensitive aspect. This was a bond-voted project. It is delayed initially by the state, and some of the redesigned work that was done on behalf of the City Council, Alderman Petty and Mayor Jordan's meetings some time ago on the discussion as it related to medians and those locations. It also was delayed as a result of stimulus funding received by the state with the Highway Department doing funds. What we don't want to do is lose the match related to this project and then have to bear the total cost of this project. So that's why the timing is critical.
Matthew.
I just wanted to address some of the general comments. You know, this was, before I came on the council, this project had been discussed ad hoc for about 6 years, to the point that the highway department had said, okay, we have control of the road anyway, so we don't care what you say, Fayetteville, we're gonna build 4 travel lanes and a continuous turn lane. And that was the plan. And then in 2009, just a few months after I was elected, I had a ward meeting out there, and I told everybody there that, you know, my preference would be to keep it at 2 or 3 lanes, pretty much like it was, but that wasn't possible because we weren't the only decision makers anymore. It was the highway department that we needed to negotiate with. And 4 lanes with a boulevard was probably the best we could get approved through the highway department. I think we trimmed something like 12 or 17, some number like that, around between 10 and 20 feet off of the plans that they had said that they were going to do with or without us. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't really what I wanted, but it was the best we could get with the highway department. You know, if I had my way, Mr. Shepherd, I'd put the whole town on a road diet and keep every tree we have, but
A road diet.
that's not politically possible. And so we do the best with what we've got.
I think that's a great point, because I'm going to tell y'all something. I go back a long ways on this council. We started talking about this road about 2004. And we went through, I can't tell you how many meetings. It went through street committee. The people voted on the funding for this thing, what, 2006? Have I got my,
Right.
It's in the bond program. Well, I came up with this idea that I wanted to keep it narrow. Well, I said, well, let's try 3 lanes and kind of thing. And the highway department said, well, that's kind of not, if I remember correctly. So I got an idea to do refuge islands down through there, which is the narrow islands, which divides the road. But we had a public meeting, you do remember that, Matthew, and I'd say about 80% of the people wanted the boulevard. I remember first they didn't really want anything, but we said we'll do a boulevard road, and the highway department went along with that. I think we went to Little Rock, didn't we, Don, trying to get the boulevard, if I remember correctly. So, yes, I want to save every tree down through there. But the highway department said that they were going to build a 4-lane road with a continuous lane down the middle of it, and that's the way it is. It's a state highway road, if I remember correctly, and you correct me if I'm wrong. So we tried to narrow it, and the people that was there that night told us they did not. I think one of the comments was that would be a give-up road. We want the boulevard. So we decided that we'll try to get the boulevard, and that will be that. And we met the state highway department, and they said okay. So that's the best we could do.
I recall you had to ask them 2 or 3 times for that boulevard.
I did. that was not an easy task. I mean, we have been talking about this road for almost, well, 8 years anyway. So now,
It was the first they'd heard of a
no,
swale.
we've closed the public comment, yes.
First they'd heard of a swale was when you visited
We
Little
talked,
Rock.
we talked about that, said not down through there, we'll try it on a future road. I'm just telling you. And that's what I know from the history of that road. I stand corrected if anybody would like to, has any other comments on that. Yes, Brenda.
Mayor, based on all this discussion about how long this has taken, I'd move that we pass this resolution.
You can do that. I would like to make one brief response to Mr. Druding, who seems to think that our condemnation situation or negotiating with our citizens is not fair or constitutional. I want to defend the city engineer and his system. They've been very effective. As you know, we did the wastewater improvement project where we had to have hundreds of easements. They were able to resolve every one of those without any having to go to court. We have success is proven by the fact that we have worked with every one of our property owners and always resolved it, with only Mr. Druding now being the exception. And we still hope to negotiate with Mr. Druding. However, as our city engineer said, we have a duty to our taxpayers. And we cannot spend more money than we should just to avoid public accusations and unpleasantries. We have that fiduciary duty of taxpayer money, and we're not going to waste it. So we might actually go to trial. I'll be disappointed if we do, but if we do, we're going to do our best and try to explain to the jury why what we have offered, we believe, is fair compensation based upon clear rulings by the Arkansas Supreme Court.
And Mr.
I am not going to be able to respond to any of that.
Well, hang on, Mr. Druding. When we close it to public comment and bring it back to the council, we usually close it to public comment. However, if an alderman wishes to hear from you, they may go ahead and give you permission to speak again. But under the ordinances and the way we have done it before, once public comment is closed, then it's closed unless an alderman wishes to ask you questions. Okay?
I understand that.
I'm willing to let him come up and speak.
We have an alderman that has.
If you can keep it brief, I would welcome your comments.
Really, all I want to respond to is something that Mr. Brown just stated. He stated that he had contacted the cities of Rogers and Springdale, among others, and that as far as Rogers, I don't have the figure here. I don't have the piece of paper. I know that he said the city of Springdale regularly pays 25%. I have had conversation with their chief counsel, Jeff Harper, and he stated something very contradictory to me. He said that they have frequently paid full appraisal value, fee simple, for property that they were taking for easements. I also spoke with representatives of the legal department in Rogers, and they said that their regular practice is to do that. I believe that the mailing that I put in your boxes referred to a radio report done by KUAF on February 8th and 10th. I would ask you, if you haven't heard that, to please listen to that, because these people that I'm quoting are discussing what their procedures are for eminent domain, and they contradict what Mr. Brown said. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Druding. Okay. All right. Anybody else got any other comments to make? Or
Yeah, I have a comment. And then I do bring this up at Water and Sewer Committees. I know David is good at talking about this. It is a very important thing to make sure we are negotiating, and I really have noticed we do continue to negotiate after condemnation. Just my personal background, I grew up in a house out in the country on a dirt road. Later it was a 2-lane, later it was a 4-lane interstate access to Interstate 80, Walmart on one side, T.O. Haas Tire on the other, and the only thing that remains are the 2 acres of trees with everything cement all around, and it's gone. And so
I watched my dad fight that my whole life, and so it's very important to let people negotiate.
Okay. Any other comments from the council? We have a motion and a second to proceed with the condemnation proceedings. Is that correct?
Yeah, to pass the resolution.
Pass the resolution. Lisa, would you please call the roll?
Farrell,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Boudreaux,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Tennant.
Yes.
All right. Now we're about to go into new business. Does council want a break? All right, let's take about shall we say, a 10-minute break?
Yeah.